I'm recording this live while we're doing a live chat stream on Twitch. I'm going to record this to upload on YouTube so that people can see who aren't here live a little bit about the textbooks that we're going to be reading for English 3514 Ethnic Literature for Children. Now, you can see here I have a list of required texts and a list of suggested text. And we'll talk about both of those as we go on. But first, we'll talk about the required text. If it's listed as a required text, that means you are required to go out and pick up a copy of this book for yourself. Does it matter what form it comes in? Not necessarily. You want it in print, you want it digitally, whatever works best for you and your studying style. I personally, for instance, like to write in my books. I find it easier to study, to take notes, to highlight things that I can easily go back to. I like to write in things physically, but I also know that a lot of these things are much cheaper digitally. So whatever works for you and your situation, go for it. I'll make some notes as we go along, but I'm fairly certain that there aren't many drastic differences in editions either. Most of the books we'll be reading here are pretty recent books, actually. We're not going to lean on the tried and true classics of the genre. We're going to look at some new stuff, award-winning stuff that's being talked about in the news, stuff that's being talked about in scholarship, stuff that's being read and held and enjoyed by children in the classroom, in libraries. We want to be where the people are, just like Ariel from The Little Mermaid, right? So I'm going to go over these books. This is not the order we'll be reading them in. But let's take a look at them as we go along. I'll tell you a little bit about them as we go. Listed first is Jean Luen Yang's American-Born Chinese. Second publishing in 2006. You'll notice this actually won the Prince Award, which is the American Library Association's award given to the best example of young adult literature. And this was the first time it was given to a graphic novel. This is a beautifully illustrated book. All the art is done by Yang himself, who has gone on to become quite a name in the world of comics. He was, in fact, sort of the ambassador for young adult literature appointed by President Obama a few years ago. And so he's highly respected. And this is an excellent, excellent book about a young boy struggling with biracial, bicultural identity. This is going to provide a lot of really interesting conversation. It's my daughter downstairs yelling. Next listed is Sean Tan's The Arrival. Now, this is unfortunately one of the pricier books that I'm asking you to read this semester. But man, it is beautiful, and I dare say is worth every penny of it. This is one of the most beautiful hybrid texts you'll ever see. It is a wordless comic book, picture book. I don't know. We'll talk about it. But it's all about the experience of an immigrant. And it's absolutely beautiful. We'll talk about Sean Tan later in the semester. Visual storytelling, visual literacy. This is going to be a great conversation piece for us. And if you buy a hard copy, this is a beautiful book to have on your shelf as well. Next, we're going to read The Birch Bark House. This is actually the oldest book on our list that we'll be reading, and it came out in 1999, so barely over 20 years old. But The Birch Bark House is about a young Ojibwe girl, and this is a historical novel about the experiences of the Ojibwe people as Western expansion in America was happening. Louise Erdrich is a First People author who has written a lot of great stuff for children and adults alike. And you can see this one was a finalist for the National Book Award for Young People's Literature. This is an excellent book, and we'll have a lot of fun reading this one, I think. A little divisive in past semesters, I dare to say. The first book that we're going to be reading together is Esperanza Rising by Pam Munoz Ryan. Now, I get a lot of feedback from students over the years telling me that this is actually a favorite of some students in elementary school, middle school. And I think there's a lot to love about this particular book. Pam Munoz Ryan is an excellent author. You can see here it's won the Pura Belle Pré Award, which is given by the ALA, the American Library Association, to the best book to depict the Latino experience. And so this one is about a young Mexican girl emigrating into America from Mexico after her family, who is quite wealthy in Mexico, is forced to come into America to become migrant workers during the Great Depression. Sounds like a laugh a minute, right? But it is actually a really charming book. This is really an excellent copy too. I don't know if all of them will have it, but some of these Scholastic books, you can see there on the back above the UPC code, they have what's called afterwords, which is ultimately stuff that you can do in the classroom for children, about the author, Q&A with the author. There's even a recipe for the Jamaica flower punch that's featured in the novel, how to make your own yarn doll, that kind of stuff. So anytime I give you a book like this, I'll probably try and provide that extra material online, because not everybody's... A child is screaming for no reason. So we have this material that I want you to read. It's really cool, contextual material. It's not just about reading the stories. We want everything, so that we can get all of that context. So I'll try to share that with you when it's necessary, but definitely try to read it as we go. Next, we have Barry Deutsch's Hereville, How Merca Got Her Sword, from Amulet Books. This was from 2010. This is an excellent graphic novel as well. It's actually the first in a series, but has a really striking visual style in this really interesting monochromatic coloring pattern. He does a lot of really interesting things with the form of the graphic novel. I think this book is really excellent for conversations about graphic novel form. I think this book is going to teach us a lot about reading comics, which is something that I think a lot of people turn their nose up at, people look down on, but hey, it's important. Kids love comics. It's an excellent entry point for a lot of readers. And for anybody who's wanting to learn about children's literature, or maybe even going into the education field in the future, comics are they're part of the landscape. You got to be able to experience that. It's also one of the few books about Orthodox Judaism that I've been able to find. Not a lot of representation on the shelves for this particular ethnic subculture, and I think it's going to be cool to look into that. We also have here a very, very recent novel from 2017, Cherie Demeline's The Marrow Thieves. We're going to pair this one with The Birch Bark House, because The Birch Bark House is a Native American written story, a historical novel. This one, however, is dystopian science fiction from the perspective of a First Peoples author, a Canadian author, Cherie Demeline. This one has won a ton of awards. There was a lot of buzz about this book when it came out. And it is also dealing in a speculative genre that's incredibly popular amongst young people. And we'll talk about, the place of science fiction and fantasy, particularly dystopias, in young adult books, which has become a rising trend in the last decade, which I think is most notable with the Hunger Games books, those kinds of things. So this is an excellent book, and I look forward to reading that with you. It's actually this is only the second time that I have taught that book. Next, we are going to read some superheroes. Miss Marvel by G. Willow Wilson and Adrian Alphona. Now, you may or may not be familiar with this character. She was created in 2014 for this book. She is part of the larger Marvel Comics universe. So if you're into the Avengers, if you're into Spider-Man, Iron Man, Captain America, Captain Marvel, then you're going to enjoy taking a peek into this. In fact, there is, included in the many Marvel Studios projects coming up, a Miss Marvel Disney Plus series coming out in the next few years. Miss Marvel was incredibly influential. This is an incredible book. This is the only one you want to pay attention to really carefully when it comes to the edition that you're buying, just by the nature of periodical comics publishing. There's actually a number of books that are Miss Marvel Volume 1. So you want to make sure that you're getting Miss Marvel Volume 1, No Normal. This is the cover you want to look at. It collects the 2014 Miss Marvel series, issues number 1 through 5. And you can actually see that information on the back next to the UPC code. That's what we're reading. Now, this character continued to be published. I have volumes 3 through 4. This is the entirety of her 2014 series, but it's been rebooted a few times. With new number 1, same character, same story, continuing on her tales as she joins the Avengers and whatnot. But we're just going to be reading the very beginning of her story. And then finally, we have Brittany Morris's Slay. This came out in 2019. I don't like assigning books that aren't in paperback yet because they're still a little expensive. This one just came out in paperback, though. This is a very recent novel, very, very interesting premise. It's so interesting. I'm actually just going to read the inside flap for you because it's so fascinating. By day, 17-year-old Kira Johnson is an honors student, a math tutor, and one of the only black kids at Jefferson Academy. But at home, she joins hundreds of thousands of black gamers who duel worldwide as Nubian personas in the secret multiplayer online role-playing card game, Slay. No one knows Kira is the game developer, not her friends, not her family, not even her boyfriend Malcolm, who believes video games are a distraction to keep the black man from becoming great. That's in quotes. But when a teen in Kansas City is murdered over a dispute in the Slay world, news of the game reaches mainstream media, and Slay is labeled as racist, exclusionist, violent hub for thugs and criminals. Even worse, Kira faces potentially being sued for anti-white discrimination, and an anonymous troll infiltrates the game, threatening to harass all the players and take over. So not only is that a really interesting, prescient topic with a lot of really complex themes about identity and personhood, it also draws into the conversation online personas and identities, and what it means to have a safe space. So that's going to be a really, really interesting book. Obviously very new. I've never taught this one before. So a lot of new material coming out. Really excited about that. Now, those are the only books that you have to buy. But I do have listed on here some suggested texts that are helpful to anybody wanting to get better at writing. We have the Norton Field Guide to Writing with a handbook, They Say, I Say with readings, and Everything's an Argument. These are really good books to have on hand for any college student. Every week, starting at a certain point, I'm going to be providing writing lessons that are tacked on the end of our regular weekly programming that will help strengthen your writing skills, both for your discussion board assignments, but also for that final big paper. But if you want additional material to help strengthen those writing skills, then these are going to be some really helpful books for you. I always suggest students have handbooks on hand throughout their college experience. I will even give you some materials from this in PDF form that I think are absolutely critical for students. But you are going to have other readings throughout the semester. As I say right here, additional required and supplemental readings will be available to you as PDFs and hyperlinks accessible on Canvas. So you'll be able to access that anywhere you're reading. And they'll be listed in each week's schedule. It'll be listed in the modules. But suffice to say, what this video is about is your required text, books that you need to go out and purchase or procure a copy for yourself. I'm going to leave that up to you. A question that's always asked of me is, what's first? Esperanza Rising. Starting week 5, we're going to dive into some primary texts, and this is going to be that book. So if you're a slower reader, pick it up and start reading now. Otherwise, we'll see you later.